too much noise today. I just need the road, the rain, and the hum of the engine.
Have you ever felt like there's a part of you don't really understand? Like, you're not sure who you really are anymore? I've been there too. Let me share something with you. Maybe it'll help you see things a little clearer. I've been there too. Lying in bed, staring at the phone, hoping for a message that never comes. That silence, it's deafening. It makes your chest tighten and your thoughts spiral. You start replaying every conversation, every look, every moment, trying to figure out what you did wrong. It's almost like your whole sense of worth gets tied up in someone else's attention, or worse, their absence. I used to think something was broken in me because I felt so desperate in those moments. Like, why does this hurt so much? Why does this silence feel like a kind of death? But then I started to learn that this reaction isn't about weakness, it's about biology. Our brains are wired for connection, for safety in relationship. Back in ancient times, being cast out, ignored, or exiled from the tribe was as good as a death sentence. And even now, even though we live in cities and have smartphones and independence, our nervous systems still react like we're in danger when someone we care about pulls away. But here's the part that really changed everything for me, realizing that his silence wasn't actually about me. Not really. It was a reflection of something going on inside of him. I used to think that if someone pulled away, it meant I had done something wrong, or I wasn't enough, or I had to fix it. But the more I sat with it, the more I began to understand projection, the way we all unconsciously assign parts of ourselves to other people. Carl Jung talked about this all the time, how we see in others what we deny in ourselves. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. His silence? It wasn't some calculated strategy or proof of my inadequacy. It was fear, or confusion, or even shame. Maybe he was afraid of intimacy because someone once got too close and then left. Maybe he thought I was too good for him and he didn't know how to handle that. Maybe he was just emotionally immature and couldn't hold space for anything deeper than surface level interactions. But whatever it wasn't about my worth. Still, that didn't make the pain vanish. Because while my brain was trying to rationalize all of this, my heart still ached. The longing didn't go away overnight. I'd still check if he saw my stories, reread old messages, and wonder if maybe, just maybe, he'd wake up and remember what we had. That part was hard to admit. I didn't want to be the one who cared more. I didn't want to be the one waiting. But I was. And the shame that came with that. The voice in my head whispering, "Why are you being so pathetic?" It was brutal. But one night, something clicked. I was sitting alone in my kitchen, lights off, scrolling through our old photos, and I caught a glimpse of my own reflection in the dark window. I didn't recognize her. She looked tired, lost, diminished, like someone who had handed her entire emotional world over to someone who couldn't even bother to send text. That moment hurt deeply, but it also woke something up in me. It made me realize just how much power I had been giving away. Every time I obsessed over his silence, every time I wondered how to make him notice me, I was handing him a piece of my energy. Not intentionally, of course. I just didn't know another way to cope with the fear of being unwanted. But in trying to hold on to something, anything, I was losing pieces of myself. I remember thinking, what if his silence isn't a message about me, but a mirror for him? What if I've just been the screen onto which he's been projecting his own fears, insecurities, and inability to face emotional intimacy? That thought was strangely freeing, because it meant I didn't have to keep internalizing his distance. It meant I could step out of that role. I could stop being his mirror and start being myself again. And here's the truth no one tells you. The moment you stop chasing after someone's attention and start coming home to yourself, something in the universe shifts. It's not that the pain disappears, but the meaning of it does. It transforms. It stops being this endless loop of what did I do wrong, and becomes a quiet realization. This isn't about me at all. That first step, realizing that someone else's emotional withdrawal is often more about them than about us is one of the hardest and most liberating truths I've ever had to accept. It doesn't mean we stop caring. It just means we stop abandoning ourselves in the process of trying to be loved. And if no one's told you this today, you don't need to prove your worth to someone who can't even see it. You don't have to keep shrinking yourself to fit into a space that was never meant for the fullness of your heart. You are not the problem. You are the light that someone else wasn't ready to face. Let that sink in. There was a time I thought love meant always being available, emotionally, physically, even energetically. Like if I was always there, always ready, always patient, maybe that would finally be enough for someone to stay. I didn't realize I was turning myself into an open book, predictable, forgivable, endlessly understanding. But here's the thing about being too available. It slowly erases your mystery, your magnetism. You become the wallpaper in someone else's room. Always there, rarely seen. I remember once canceling plans with friends because he said he might want to see me. He didn't confirm. He didn't ask. Just left the door open. And I waited. All night. Just in case. That night taught me something I wouldn't fully admit until much later. I had made myself optional in my own life. And what I've come to learn, painfully, honestly, is that we teach others how to treat us by what we tolerate. The more I gave, the less he noticed. The more I forgave, the less he respected. I thought love meant unconditional presence. But what I was really doing was sacrificing my boundaries in the hope that it would make me more lovable. It didn't. It just made me invisible. Carl Jung talked about how our desire for love can become so distorted that we abandon our inner self just to be accepted. That hit hard when I first read it, because deep down, I wasn't really loving him. I was desperately trying to make him the proof that I was lovable. And here's the paradox. The more I tried to prove my worth, the more I lost it in his eyes. Not because I wasn't worthy, but because human psychology doesn't value what is always accessible, always forgiving, always willing. It's not cruelty, it's biology. We're wired to chase, to wonder, to desire what feels a little out of reach. When you're always yes, always sure, always available, there's nothing left to wonder about, nothing left to earn. I started to notice it in the small things. He'd reply hours later, sometimes not at all. He'd forget things I shared. He'd cancel plans last minute, knowing I'd always be understanding. And I was. Every time. Because I told myself that if I showed him how loyal and kind I was, he'd finally realize my value. But people don't wake up one day and appreciate what they've spent months taking for granted. That kind of awareness doesn't come from repetition. It comes from contrast. So I began experimenting with something that felt radical, not responding right away, not rearranging my life to accommodate someone who wouldn't even commit to plans, not over-explaining myself, just being a little less available. At first, it felt wrong, like I was being cold, but then I realized it wasn't coldness. It was self-respect. I stopped trying to fix the silence with more effort. I stopped making excuses for his lack of presence. I started asking different questions. Not, how do I make him want me again? But, why do I think I have to make someone want me in the first place? That shift from proving to choosing changed everything. There's this quiet confidence that grows when you stop chasing someone who doesn't see you. It's not dramatic. It's not a performance. It's a soft, sacred return to yourself. And when you start living like you're already enough, people feel it. They sense it in the way you take up space without apology, in the way you say no without guilt, in the way your eyes stop searching for approval and start holding your own reflection with grace. Somewhere along the way, I realized that I wasn't put on this earth to be someone's emotional support system while they figure out whether I'm worth loving. I'm here to live, fully, boldly, and that kind of life doesn't wait around for people to notice. It creates its own gravity. And here's something wild. The less I try to be enough, the more I started to feel like I already was. Not in a loud, overcompensating way, but in that quiet, steady, undeniable way that says, I know who I am, and I'm not available for anything less than mutual respect. If you're reading this and wondering whether pulling back makes you petty, it doesn't. It makes you powerful. Giving someone space isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's the most loving thing you can do for them and for yourself. It forces clarity, it reveals truth, and it reminds you that being chosen isn't the same as being valuable. So the next time you feel tempted to reach out first, to over-explain, to bend a little more, pause. Ask yourself, if I truly love myself in this moment, what would I do? Then do that, again and again, until the habit of self-abandonment is replaced with a rhythm of self-honor. And you'll know you're healing when your silence stops being a strategy and starts being your sanctuary. When your absence isn't a game, but a gateway to peace, to power, to presence. Not his, yours. I didn't know how powerful silence could be until I stopped filling the space. No explanations, no passive-aggressive posts, no one-word check-ins just to keep a foot in the door. I just stopped, quietly, intentionally, and without warning. And the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was alive, heavy even, not with pain this time, but with presence. My own. At first, I expected him not to notice. Honestly, I thought I'd disappear and he'd keep going like I was never there. That's what my wounded heart told me. That I was forgettable, replaceable, not enough to leave an imprint. But then something strange happened. Not immediately, not dramatically, just subtly, quiet ripples. He started viewing my stories again, liking old photos, leaving random comments. Nothing direct, just signals, probes, as if to say, "Are you still there?" But I wasn't. Not in the way he remembered, because the silence I'd created wasn't a manipulation, it was a boundary. It was the first time I made space for myself instead of him. Carl Jung once said that the psyche naturally seeks balance. That when one part is overstimulated, like his ego fed for months by my attention, its opposite begins to rise. When I removed my validation, the balance shifted. His confidence started to crack. His certainty began to dissolve. And in that space, he began to feel the weight of my absence. But let me be honest, I wasn't doing it for him. I wasn't sitting there hoping he'd spiral. I was busy relearning how to breathe in my own air again. I was filling my schedule with things that lit me up. I went back to painting, to moving my body in ways that felt good, to laughing, genuinely laughing, without checking to see who was watching. I wasn't pretending to be okay. I was becoming okay. And that was the real shift. When your silence is just a mask, they can sense it. But when it's rooted in actual peace, it becomes impenetrable. I think we underestimate how deeply people notice the absence of energy they once took for granted, especially the kind that was always available like a lifeline. He had grown used to the ease of my presence, my emotional labor, my availability. But when it vanished, something inside him started to feel unsettled. He didn't know it was a lesson, but it was. Every unread message he left hanging, every moment I had to convince myself I was overreacting, they were all starting to echo back to him. Not because I said anything, but because I didn't. That's the thing about energy, it never lies. And when you finally stop feeding someone's ego, their hunger shows. His texts started to trickle in, vague, innocent. Things like, "Hey, just checking in," or "Heard this song and thought of you." Part of me wanted to reply. The old version of me would have melted at the thought. But the new me? She paused. She asked herself, what am I responding to here? The man or the memory? It's wild how clear things become when you stop reacting. You see patterns. You recognize cycles. And suddenly, you realize he's not reaching out because he misses you. He's reaching out because he misses what you gave him. Your energy, your reassurance, your reflection of his significance. But you're not that mirror anymore. This wasn't about punishment. I didn't want revenge. I didn't need him to feel the pain I'd felt. I just needed to stop giving away pieces of myself to someone who didn't know how to hold them. And that kind of detachment, the kind that's born from clarity, not bitterness, is what made all the difference. He didn't know what to do with the silence. It disarmed him. And maybe, for the first time, he started to hear his own thoughts without my presence cushioning them. Maybe for the first time, he saw himself. Not through my love, but through the emptiness I left behind. And maybe that was the point all along. Because some people need to lose you to see you. Not because you weren't visible before, but because they never bothered to look. And some lessons, the ones that change us, can only be taught in silence. What I learned during that time was simple and life-altering. Absence has a language. It speaks truths that words never could. It says, I'm no longer willing to abandon myself to be loved by you. It says, I've stopped waiting for you to see me because I finally see myself. And I won't lie to you. This kind of silence isn't easy. It takes everything you've got not to break it when the loneliness creeps in or when the memory of what once was tries to seduce you back. But when you hold that line, something inside you begins to trust yourself again. You stop betraying your own soul for someone else's comfort. Eventually, he'll either wake up, truly wake up, or he'll drift away, unable to survive without the energy he once harvested from your need for him. Either way, you win, because now the power has shifted, not to control him, but to reclaim you. That's what silence did for me. It gave me back my voice. There's a moment in every transformation when you look at the person you once were, the version of you who waited, who doubted, who bent in every direction just to be chosen, and you feel a deep ache. Not shame, not regret, just compassion. You see her clearly, the exhaustion in her eyes, the hope she clung to, the pain she disguised as patience. And you want to hold her hand and whisper, we didn't need to do all that. That moment came for me like a quiet exhale. I was walking home after spending the evening with some old friends. No drama, no forced smiles, just laughter and warmth. And I realized I hadn't thought about him in hours. That may not sound like a big deal, but for me, it was everything. For weeks, he'd lived in my mind like a ghost I couldn't shake. But now he was fading. Slowly, yes, but definitely fading. And what was taking his place? Me, my voice, my wants, my rhythm. It was like finally hearing music in a room that had been silent for so long. But that's also when it hit me. The version of him I missed was one I'd created, crafted carefully from pieces of potential, hope, and projection. I hadn't been in love with who he really was. I was in love with the version of myself I hoped to become through his love, the validation I craved, the story I wanted to tell. Carl Jung spoke of the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted, and how it becomes dangerous when we mistake it for a truth. That's what I'd done in that relationship. I became the version of myself I thought would be loved, agreeable, easygoing, undemanding. But in doing that, I'd abandoned my real self. And that's the most painful kind of betrayal, the one we commit against our own soul. I started thinking about the early days with him, how I'd always hesitate before saying what I really felt, how I'd tell half-truths just to avoid seeming too much, how I'd smile through disappointment because I didn't want to push him away. I wasn't being a liar. I was being afraid. Afraid that if I showed him all of me, the full, wild, passionate, complex truth, he'd leave. But what I failed to see was that I was already disappearing. Not because of him, but because of me. Because of the part of me that believed I had to earn love by shrinking. And that's when it really landed. He didn't ignore me because I was too much. He ignored me because I'd already told him, without words, that I'd settle for less. That I'd accept crumbs and call it a meal. That I'd be there no matter how little he showed up. That realization broke something open inside of me. Not in a dramatic, movie scene kind of way. Just deeply, like a soft but permanent tear in a fabric that could never be stitched the same way again. I cried that night. Not over him. Over me. Over the girl who thought she had to work so hard just to be seen. Over the woman who'd mistaken anxiety for love, silence for mystery, inconsistency for chemistry. Over the years I spent molding myself into palatable versions just to fit into someone else's comfort zone. But after the tears came the stillness. A clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. I didn't hate him. I didn't even blame him. He was who he was. But I was finally seeing myself clearly. And that was worth everything. There's something sacred about the moment you stop fighting to be understood by someone who never tried to understand you in the first place. When you stop trying to reopen a closed door, hoping the room behind it has somehow changed. Because it's not about slamming that door shut. It's about realizing you've outgrown the house entirely. I started doing small things just for me. Waking up early to write, going on solo walks without headphones, journaling without filters, moving my body in ways that felt strong. Not because any of it would get his attention, but because it brought me back to me. And slowly, my nervous system started to settle. The hypervigilance, that constant scanning for his next move, began to ease. I wasn't in survival mode anymore. I was in reclamation. One night, I received a message from him. The kind that's half curious, half uncertain. "I've been thinking about you. Hope you're okay." I stared at it for a long time. There was a time I would have exploded with joy just to hear from him. But now, I felt nothing. Not anger, not excitement, just neutrality. Like hearing from someone you once knew in a dream. That's when I knew I'd crossed the threshold. The moment when their reentry no longer tempts you to reopen the wound. When you can acknowledge what was without inviting it back in. Not because you've built walls, but because you've built a home within yourself. And that home, it's sacred. It's built on truth, on dignity, on the quiet knowing that you are no longer waiting to be chosen, because you've already chosen yourself. That's the real shift, the one they don't always see, the one that doesn't show up in your Instagram stories or your outfit or your new haircut. It's the shift in your energy, the one that says, "I am not a reflection of your attention. I am a source of my own." And from that place, everything changes. It happens so gradually, I almost missed it. This quiet, persistent feeling that I was no longer orbiting someone else's world. That my emotional weather wasn't dictated by his moods, his silences, his rare flashes of attention. I remember sitting in a cafe, sipping my coffee alone, and realizing I wasn't thinking about him. Not even a little. My mind was somewhere else, on the book I was reading, the strangers around me, the plans I had for the weekend. And it hit me, I was back in my own life. I can't tell you the exact moment it shifted, but it did. Slowly, gently, the pull of his absence loosened. Not because he changed, not because he came back with the apology I'd once fantasized about, but because I stopped needing him to. I stopped looking for closure from someone who never had the capacity to offer it. And that, ironically, was the closure. Carl Jung wrote about individuation, the process of becoming whole, of integrating all the parts of ourselves we've denied, suppressed, or projected onto others. That was what I was living, not all at once, not in some spiritual awakening kind of way, but in tiny, defiant acts of self-return, saying no without guilt, speaking honestly, even when it felt uncomfortable, trusting my intuition, especially when it didn't align with what I wanted to believe. And with every small act, I gathered the pieces of myself I'd scattered, trying to be loved. I used to think healing meant forgetting, that I'd finally be over him when his name no longer made my chest tighten. But now I understand. Healing is remembering without pain. It's being able to revisit the memories and feel gratitude, not for the suffering, but for what it taught me, for who I became because of it. Because here's the wild truth. I needed to lose myself in him in order to find myself in me. The version of me who tolerated the bare minimum, who made excuses for bad behavior, who dimmed her light so she wouldn't be too much. She was operating from an old script, one written long before he entered the picture. Maybe it came from childhood, maybe from culture, maybe from a million tiny moments that taught me love was something to earn. But that story wasn't mine anymore. I started rewriting it today. I stopped asking, why doesn't he love me? And started asking, why did I think I had to prove I was worthy of love? And let me tell you something, that shift, it's revolutionary. It changes how you walk into a room, how you speak, how you love. You stop chasing people who don't see you. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop begging for crumbs when you know you were born to feast. And the most beautiful part, you stop blaming them. Not because they didn't do harm, but because holding on to that pain keeps you tethered to a story that no longer serves you. You begin to see their actions not as personal attacks, but as reflections of their own unhealed wounds. And with that perspective, you release them, not with anger, but with grace. I know that sounds almost too good to be true. I used to hear people talk about releasing with love and think, yeah, maybe after a decade and 10 therapy sessions a week. But here's what I found. The moment I truly anchored into myself, their power dissolved. The tether snapped. And suddenly, forgiveness wasn't something I had to force. It just happened. quietly, like a breeze clearing the smoke. I still remember the last time he messaged me. Something vague, something familiar. And for the first time, I didn't feel pulled toward it. I didn't overthink. I didn't analyze the punctuation. I didn't wonder what it meant. I just didn't answer. Not out of spite, but because I was busy with my life, with my joy, with my friends and my late-night music sessions and my newfound peace. And in that moment, I realized something profound. The real victory wasn't in getting him back. It was in not needing him at all. I'd become whole again. Not the same kind of whole I was before him. No, better, deeper, wiser, softer in all the right places, stronger in the rest. I wasn't trying to become someone without him. I was becoming someone I never allowed myself to be. Someone who didn't shrink, who didn't chase, who didn't ask permission to be loved. And the best part? I liked her. I really, really liked her. So if you're in that messy middle, the space between longing and letting go, hold on. It doesn't last forever. One day, you'll wake up and realize the ache has softened. The silence doesn't sting. The mirror no longer reflects your pain. It reflects your power. And you'll smile. Not because he's come back, but because you have. There's a certain kind of silence that doesn't feel lonely anymore. It feels sacred. That's what I started to feel in the mornings. I'd wake up, no rush to check my phone, no pit in my stomach wondering if he messaged. Just stillness. A kind of peace I didn't know was possible, especially after months of emotional chaos. But here I was, no longer haunted by his absence. No longer trying to decode a man who never truly showed up. Instead, I was showing up for myself. And yet, something strange began to happen. Something Jung probably would have called predictable. Just as I was no longer seeking him, he began to reappear. Like clockwork. A few likes on photos. A DM here and there. Subtle breadcrumbs meant to test the waters. To see if I'd bite. And for a second, I felt that old flutter. That familiar flicker of hope. But it was faint, like hearing a song you used to cry to and realizing you no longer remember the lyrics. Because this time was different. I was different. He wasn't reaching out because he had changed. He was reaching out because I had. The energy he once fed on, my longing, my effort, my availability, it wasn't there anymore. And like any system thrown out of balance, his psyche was reacting. Jung called this the law of compensation. When one extreme dominates, the unconscious pushes in the opposite direction to restore equilibrium. In other words, my withdrawal triggered his pursuit. Not because he loved me more now, but because I was no longer available to mirror his significance. But I wasn't playing anymore. That was the real transformation. This wasn't a game of reverse psychology or make him chase you. This was me choosing myself so deeply, so fully, that his reappearance didn't shake me. It didn't even excite me. Because once you taste peace, real, embodied peace, chaos loses its charm. He tried harder. Messages with more weight. I've been thinking about us. I miss you. The kind of words I used to ache for. The kind of words that once would have made me drop everything just to respond. But now they sounded hollow. Not because he didn't mean them. Maybe he did. But because I no longer needed them to feel whole. That's the irony of healing. You don't heal so they'll come back. You heal so that even if they do, you're no longer waiting for it. Your worth no longer hinges on their recognition. Your joy no longer depends on their consistency. You become your own home, your own mirror, your own constant. I thought about replying. Just once. For closure. For clarity. But then I realized I already had both. The closure came the day I stopped needing his attention to feel valuable. The clarity came when I saw his pattern for what it was. Not love, but dependency on my emotional labor. And I won't lie, it's a strange kind of power, that moment when someone who once made you feel small starts chasing your light. But it's also dangerous, because if you're not careful, it can pull you back into old dynamics. It can tempt you to trade your peace for a fleeting sense of being wanted. That's why you have to be rooted, not in resentment, but in truth, in a quiet, unwavering truth of who you are now. So I didn't answer, not to punish him, not to make a point, but because my silence was no longer a cry for help, it was a boundary, a sacred container protecting everything I'd rebuilt. And Deep down, I knew if I opened that door again, I'd be inviting in the very thing I'd spent months healing from. He kept trying for a while, then less, then nothing. And that too was a gift, because it proved something I'd suspected all along. When people want control, not connection, they lose interest the moment you stop playing the role they cast you in. And me, I was no longer acting. I was writing, creating, connecting with people who saw me, really saw me, without needing me to shrink or silence my needs. I was laughing again, deep belly laughter that came from feeling free. I was rediscovering the woman I'd buried beneath years of trying to be enough. She didn't want to be chased. She didn't want apologies. She didn't even want revenge. She just wanted to be whole. And she was getting there, step by imperfect step. Carl Jung said, "We meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life." And I realized that maybe this man who once felt like my everything, was just another disguise, a reflection, a teacher, not of love, but of self. He showed me where I abandoned myself, where I made someone else my source of worth. And in walking away, he gave me the chance to walk home, to me. And now, I don't look back with bitterness. I don't fantasize about what could have been. I don't script imaginary conversations in my head. I just breathe. I just live. I just love, not desperately, not conditionally, but freely. Because once you stop begging to be seen, you start seeing yourself. And in that mirror, you find the one person who is always worth coming back to. You know what's wild? The same silence that used to feel like rejection now feels like protection. The same man who once felt like the center of my universe is just a part of the past, a necessary detour that brought me back to myself. I look back now, not with anger, but with awe, because I see what I couldn't see then, that everything I thought I lost was actually what I needed to let go of in order to become who I am now. There's this moment after the healing when you suddenly realize you don't want him back. Not because you're bitter, but because you've outgrown the version of yourself who once needed that kind of love. The woman who would have accepted crumbs. The woman who thought her value depended on how much someone else noticed her. She was doing the best she could with what she knew. But she's not the one writing the story anymore. Now I write it. I choose the people in my life. I choose the energy I surround myself with. I choose myself again and again and again. And it's not always glamorous. There's still days I feel the echo of old wounds. Still moments I wonder if I'm too much or not enough. But those thoughts don't run the show anymore. They're just passing clouds in a sky that's become wide and steady. Because here's the truth. The way he treated me wasn't about me. It was about his capacity, his wounds, his fear. And for too long, I made that my responsibility. I tried to love him into wholeness. I thought that if I just stayed soft enough, patient enough, available enough, he'd eventually choose me. But real love isn't something you convince someone to give. It's something that flows freely from someone who is capable of giving it. And if they're not, that's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their readiness. Carl Jung said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." That quote lives in me now because I did let something happen to me. I let someone's silence define me. I let someone's absence shrink me. I let someone's indifference dictate how I saw myself. But I don't do that anymore. I choose different now. I choose to become someone who doesn't chase, but attracts. Someone who doesn't beg, but receives. Someone who doesn't settle, but expands. And funny enough, when you live like that, from truth, from alignment, people start showing up differently. Not because you manipulated them, but because your energy no longer invites disrespect. Your standards are clear. Your boundaries are firm. Your joy is not up for negotiation. I wish I could go back and hug the version of me who waited by the phone, who reread texts looking for hidden meanings, who twisted herself into knots trying to be seen. I'd tell her, it's not you. It was never you. And one day, you'll see this silence as the beginning, not the end. Because the silence wasn't a punishment. It was a clearing, a sacred void where the old story fell apart and the new one began. And here's what that new story sounds like. I am not someone you ignore. I am not someone you keep as an option. I am not someone who chases, pleads, or waits in emotional purgatory. I am someone who glows on her own. I am someone who creates joy, meaning, and depth from within. I am someone who walks away when love stops being mutual, and I don't need you to see that. I just need to remember it. Every day, in every choice, in every moment where I'm tempted to go back to old patterns just because they feel familiar. Because here's what I know now. Familiarity is not the same as safety. And attention is not the same as love. And love, real, grounded, soul-expanding love, will never ask me to shrink. I am no longer the woman who needs to be chosen. I am the woman who chooses herself first, who chooses peace over chaos, who chooses truth over fantasy, who chooses a life that reflects her worth instead of questioning it. And to the girl I once was, the one who gave her heart to someone who couldn't hold it, I say thank you. You taught me what it means to come home to myself. And to the woman I've become, I say, I see you, I love you, and I'm never leaving again. If this felt meaningful to you, it might mean something to someone else too. So hit like, leave a comment, or subscribe. That's how YouTube knows to share it with others. Maybe together, we can help someone see things a little differently.